Taylor Ansley,
Approved.
George Peterson,
Approved.
okay, Mashika Jefferson,
Approved.
okay. Sorry, my computer froze up for a second. I'm trying to find something. My list is not in front of me. So sorry. Joe Cassidy, sorry if I already called you.
Approved.
Thank you. And John Francis not with us today. Did I skip anybody? Okay, all right, the motion passes. Next on our agenda.
Okay, the next order of business is deferred maintenance that's been discussed a fair amount in the past. Bob Hartwell has doing some investigations for possible additional funding for deferred maintenance, so I'll let him kind of fill us in.
Okay, thank you, John. In talking with my councilman and some others, it seems that we're not doing enough to secure funding to answer the deferred maintenance problems that appear in the March 2019 Stewart report on deferred maintenance. And my hope was that there would be taking the list of parks that were rated D and F. Originally, there were 29. And setting forth what work has been done on those parks. And mostly that would have come from being picked up in the bond funded projects. Washington Park, for example, was rated a D. It has some significant work going on. So some of the deferred problem there is probably going to be pulled into the other construction. But there are parks that are not receiving any of that kind of support. So my hope was that we would have a list of the parks that are being used the most, even if we just pick 10 of them, and what work has been done on deferred maintenance on those parks and what is left to be done, and to make a serious proposal as part of the budget process to get additional funding to step up this deferred maintenance problem. Originally, it was $19 million just for the parks. That doesn't include the neighborhood centers. And that's not going to get done unless we make an effort to get some extra funding. And the best way to do that is to do it in the budget process, which is going to be tough if we ever tried now because we're getting awfully close. But that was what I was trying to get at. What I think we need to do and haven't done well enough with is chasing the funding to get this deferred maintenance problem cleaned up in a reasonable period of time, with the hope that we can go forward and take care of these parks so we don't have this problem again. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. There's definitely money around, and the process is what some of us refer to as the meat grinder. You know, once you get your proposal in, it's a serious proposal, and you get it into public works and then into city council, you're in there competing with everybody else, but we should be competing. There's a lot of good things being asked for in affordable housing, law enforcement, whatever it is. We should be in there in the same way, scrapping for money, particularly since there's money around. So that's a little long-winded, but that's what I was hoping to accomplish.
So, William, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, I do. We've gone, we were in 2018, the funding for the bonds in 2018, those projects were being discussed and almost kind of being earmarked prior to 2018. Now we started our deferred maintenance assessment in, I think, either late 2017, early 2018. And so what we did, we went back to look at what funding from the 2018 bonds, how the funding from those projects address very specific needs that were listed out in the deferred maintenance assessment. For instance, if we got $2 million to make improvements at Schaffner Park, but resurfacing the parking lot was not part of the scope, which is a specific need listed in the deferred maintenance report, then we didn't count that parking lot or the funding, all of the funding that was given to the park as addressing the needs. And so we literally had to go through every single solitary project, look at the scope, and then look at the very fine details that were outlined in the deferred maintenance assessment and begin to see how the 2018 bonds are two-thirds funding cycle, two-thirds capital funding cycle that happens every other year, as well as looking at what operating dollars we've invested into our parks to address just the specific needs that were listed in the deferred maintenance assessment. And so as of January 2021, I believe it was March of 2021, we did identify where the funding went that addressed very specific needs in the deferred maintenance assessment. We did get in touch with Stewart Engineering to figure out what type of algorithms they use to come up with the scoring for the parks. And we were able to rescore our parks as of March of last year. And I'm happy to say that after we rescored, we only have one park that still has a score of an F, which is Forest Park. But what's making that park was weighing heavily on the score of that park is the accessibility of the park, which we found in a number of cases throughout our park system. Accessibility for persons that who have mobility impairments weighed heavily on a lot of our facilities in terms of playgrounds, parking lots, recreation centers at those particular locations, so on and so forth. And what the consultant did was there were instances where where our parks suffered in terms of scoring when they shouldn't have suffered in terms of scoring because of accessibility. When there isn't it's very difficult to provide accessibility or parking, accessible parking spaces at an area such as Anderson Luther that is just open space. It was never the city's intent to provide parking. So when we went back and rescored our facilities, we took all of that into consideration. But Forest Park still does. Right now, Forest Park is the only park that currently has a score of an F. Going through the list of rankings from when we rescored the facilities, the only other park that had a score of a D was Runnymede. And a lot of that was due to Runnymede, again, we don't have any above ground structures really that people kind of go out and enjoy at that park. It's open space, is maintained by vegetation management. But there's a creek and a stream that's running through it that's created some very, very severe erosion issues. But there's already funding in place to address those. And so once that work gets complete, we'll go back and go through the deferred maintenance assessment and see where the funding from stormwater and city county utilities address the needs in the deferred maintenance assessment, and then we'll rescore that park as well. It was our plan to go through and rescore our facilities towards the end of this calendar year, once the majority of our 2018 bond projects were complete. It's a very, very tedious process. Takes a tremendous amount of time, but we're working on that. I'm happy to say that we have a lot of the funding as of April 1st of this year. Over, I think it's $11.35 million out of the entire $14.5 million that was allocated that was allocated from the 2018 bonds that would address deferred maintenance needs. $11.35 million of those projects or portions of those projects are complete. And so once we get closer to 95 to 100% of that money being spent, we'll go back and rescore our facilities, kind of see where we are. But for instance, Happy Hill was one of the parks that scored, had a D or an F. That park was entirely renovated. That park now scores an A because all of the issues at that park were addressed. And even the minor issues at the recreation center would not bring the score down below where it is right now, it being scored an A. We did, as we've been going through, not just Recreation Parks Department, but as the city as a whole has been going through and completing the projects from 2018 bonds. There have been some capital savings. A report was taken to City Council in the Committee of the Whole, I believe a week and a half ago, maybe last week, 2 weeks ago, I think, and where City Council is going to go through and look at those capital project balances and see where that money is going to be reallocated. Again, we provided the data. City Council will be the ones that will make those decisions. But two of the things that are high on Council's priority list are transportation, DOT, and recreation parks. So we do believe that the majority, if we were hopeful that a lot of that money will go back to addressing some additional maintenance needs. Maintenance was part of the presentation that was made by the budget office to City Council. Council does have some additional things that I believe their constituents are asking them that they would want to complete. And so they're kind of weighing out how that funding is going to be allocated. I believe Council wanted to take maybe a month or 2 months to kind of figure out how that funding would be distributed and figure out which projects will continue to get funded and which ones wouldn't. But that is going to be entirely separate and independent of the budget process. A couple of the items, two major items that we're hopeful that's being talked about in terms of our budget cycle that would get funded. They're looking to give us the money, an operating budget to address two major issues we have in our park system right now. One of them is at the Muddy Creek Greenway, where we have some severe erosion issues going back towards the country club side of the trail. And then we have another greenway, which is the Boeing Branch Trail that goes from 311 over to Boeing Boulevard, where we have severe erosion issues where the stream bank has begun to undercut the actual greenway itself. And that greenway at the Boeing Branch Trail has been closed for about 5 to 7 years. It's just not safe for anyone to go down through there. And so there isn't any future major bond funds that, from a geo bond that we could use for something like that. There is some debt capacity and limited obligation bonds. But the way that the 2/3 funding cycle works, they may give you, $100,000 the first 2 years, and then you skip a year, then you might get another $100,000 to address major capital projects or capital needs. But seeing that we would need millions of dollars to address these two specific greenway issues, they're looking to give us that money as part of our operating budget so that we can get those things corrected as well.
So, so what Bob has described is go after some additional funding. Is that helpful? Hello? Can you mute?
Felicia, can you mute them?
Thank you, Felicia.
Thank you, Felicia. I'm sorry, Chair, could you ask that question again?
Yeah, what Bob had described is, trying to go ask additional funding. Is that helpful? If that's not helpful, is there anything else that we can do that's helpful?
I don't. The only funding options that we have as a department is through our general fund, through 2/3 bonds. When limited obligation bonds are provided to us, that's how the work at Long Creek is being funded. The first phase of construction at Long Creek is being funded, as well as 2/3 bonds. And then we have grants that we can apply for, but they don't typically take money from transportation and give it to recreation, and vice versa. We provided a very detailed list. Felicia, if you don't mind bringing that capital projects balance sheet up. This is a portion of the presentation that was provided to council. And this is where our 2/3 capital funding cycle, these are what we've said are our priorities. Many of these of which have come directly from the deferred maintenance assessment. And so you can see there isn't any next year. It is not a funding cycle. However, in 23-24, that is what's being requested from the Recreation and Parks Department, from recreation facility lighting, some greenway resurfacing, some additional improvements at Salem Lake, additional playground renovations, swimming pool repairs. And we have some irrigation systems in soccer fields that need to be replaced. And that last item you see down there, recreation and parks facility renewal, that is funding that is specifically allocated towards our outdoor building structures, such as restrooms, recreation centers. This is what they're trying to give us funding for now, as part of that Virginia Newell Massey Greenway. That's a $1.6 million estimated project. At the Muddy Creek, that's $1.5 million. We have some water damage at the Polo Recreation Center that has caused the floor. It's caused some damage to the floor. So we're requesting, they're going to give us some money to address the waterproofing, and they're also going to give us the money to replace the gym floor once that waterproofing is complete. And the other money, the $250,000 for Hanestown Playground. Hanestown Playground is one of the last playgrounds that we have in our park system that has not been renovated, that still has sand as a safety surfacing. To me, it's a hazard. And I'm probably going to be making a few phone calls to Mr. Taylor and risk management to kind of give them and the council member of the ward a heads up that we probably just need to pull that playground out and not have one. It's safer to not have one than to have dangerous equipment there on site. This next slide shows you some pictures of the erosion damage on the Boeing Branch Trail. If you look at the second picture in the middle of the screen, you can see where the greenway is being undercut by the creek. There basically isn't a shoulder there. And that's one of the reasons why that area has been closed. Down on the lower, and some of the lower pictures to the right, you can see exposed utilities that are crossing the creek. There are also Duke Energy has an easement down through this area where there's some of their infrastructure is in danger of falling into the creek if someone doesn't get in there. Our portion of the project would not be to correct the entire stream. That's a much larger project that's being headed up by our stormwater department. We're looking to just address the areas that you can see around the 101-foot mark and then at 133-foot mark of the greenway, so that we can at least get that greenway, the stream bank established, in good working conditions, so that we can get the greenway open again. Felicia, if you can go to the capital project balances. That's on page 7. Go back to the top. So these are some areas that this was also presented to committee of the whole. So again, city council will be the ultimate authority that will kind of make the decision in terms of where those project balances would be distributed. You have economic development, you have housing, neighborhood development, transportation, and recreation parks. But if you look at the capital project balances, these are project balances, mainly from our 2018 GO bonds. Economic development is $13 million there. But when you look at recreation, we have 703,000. Of that, there are several projects that are closed. They're nearing completion, and some of that funding is there. Some of that, a little over 350 is still there. Under that line item where it says policy decision to reappropriate. Projects that have been closed out, that money is available now to reappropriate is approximately $350,000. And the majority of that came from our lighting improvements.
I have a question. This is Mashika. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and I don't even know where if my question fits into here, but I know that the flooring was redone at a lot of the rec centers, but the backboards, the goals were not. Are there plans to redo or either resurface the backboards of the gyms where there's new floor?
Yes, a lot of those backboards and rims have been ordered. We're waiting for them to come in. They're just on back order. It's just taking forever to get anything shipped to us. But our plan, we went into those facilities. Our plan, we had funding to redo the gym floors. We had $125,000 to do the gym floors. Our bids came in anywhere between $85,000 and $90,000. That's to demolish the old floor and put in the new ones. And so we had some funding left over. And so we did, my park superintendent, Renata Owens, has worked to replace the backboards and rims at those locations. They've been ordered. We just haven't gotten them in yet.
And my other question is, with the new floors that have been put in, they have more cushion in them. Is that correct? So they're a little thicker.
They have the padding. The flooring systems come with a padding, a shock absorption padding that goes underneath them. It's all part of that overall system. But it's much easier on the knees, much easier on the ankles, and it comes with, I believe, either 15 or 20-year warranty as long as we maintain them according to their specifications. So yes.
So with the flooring being thicker, it means that it's higher up off the floor, correct?
Not necessarily. Like for instance, when we redid the W.R. Anderson Center, the original flooring may have been this thick. I don't know if you can see that through my camera. It may have been this thick because that was the best technology that was available at that time. What we put in was maybe a little thinner, but it has much better shock absorption than the previous floor did. And so as technology, as the technology in that particular industry has progressed, we were able to take advantage of that. And they have spacers and things that they place on the floor, but basically the height of the floor is probably within 1/8 of an inch from where it was previously.
Okay, so I guess the reason I'm asking the question is, with the flooring being a little thicker and a little higher up off the floor, does that change what would be, say, like if a rec center was going to host something like a 3-on-3 tournament, or I know that Central Y would have like basketball tournaments and things like that. So is there a thought about making sure that the goal height is at the correct regulation height from the floor, since the floor is a little thicker? Am I making sense with my question?
Yeah, that's all part of that entire process. The goal heights are adjusted to be measured exactly 10 feet off of the floor. Some of our goals, staff can adjust them, but they have tools that they use to get the goal height exactly where it needs to be. So regardless of the height or thickness of the floor, there's a 10-foot goal will still be a 10-foot goal. If we needed to have an 8-foot goal for some of our youth programs, then they can lower the goal down to 8 feet. But that's all part of that project. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
On this sheet, you'll see very specifically where the remaining park balances came from, and where that what capacity there is to reappropriate. You know, when the Happy Hill renovations were complete, and that was a 2014 bond project, there was $19,169 there. Brushy Fork Playground, there's $22,000. There's some funding there left from a couple of playground projects. There's some $53,000 left from Laughlin. There's some pool repair. There's some Sims basketball court money left there. But that kind of gives you an idea about what types of capital balances that we've had for reappropriation. And that's where you see that $350,849, that dollar figure coming from that was shown on the previous slide. And in addition to that, these are unfunded capital needs, and these are needs that we've identified that we just don't have funding for right now. But as part of that, the Department of Transportation is the lead planning organization for greenways throughout our park system. And so it doesn't, even though it won't show up as a line item under one of our budgets, where there are a couple of projects that we're working on with them. There's additional $1 billion in there for additional greenway development. As many of you have, we've talked about this in the past, that one portion of the Salem Creek Greenway that goes through the area that we call the gorge that constantly floods now. They're looking for $920,000 so they can reroute that greenway around that flooded area. And we're also working with them on a greenway wayfinding signage system that I've mentioned to the commission before, so that emergency management can get out to those areas in our parks and greenways much quicker, so to provide the services for those in need. Below that, you'll see a list of capital projects, unfunded capital needs that we have that we've submitted, which include corporate renovations to the fountains at Corporate Plaza. We have several park bridges that still need to be replaced. There's a gymnasium that's been requested to add on at the Old Town Recreation Center. We have several park restroom renovations that citizens have requested that we make them year-round restrooms. And so that's heating the pipe chases and getting the electricity in there so they can be open year-round. Landscaping improvements in front of our recreation centers, basketball courts improvements. There's some greenways and walkways improvements at Historic Pythagorean through the wetlands, ball field fencing replacement, and then some improvements there at Gateway Commons. That will be to provide additional lighting and a restroom there. And then below that, you'll see a total of other identified park needs or council requests that you see listed here. And a lot of these projects vary, but many of these are city council requests, things that they have on their wish list. So out of, from a departmental standpoint, we've identified almost $19 billion in unfunded capital needs. The majority of those do have a direct impact on our deferred maintenance and a deferred maintenance assessment. A lot of the things that you see below that 45.1 billion, a lot of that is new park amenities, but several of them are fixing things that are broken at existing locations. So, Chair, there isn't any new money. We have capital project balances, but there isn't any new funding source, not one that the city's made me aware of. But we did go through a pretty detailed list of with our budget office to get all of the information from the city council, and we were very, very honest. I told them that that these are things that I have broken that need to get fixed, and we prioritize them based on safety. If we have a facility that's been closed or that poses a risk to citizens, then those were the things that are highest on our list. And I believe that they listened. I know the budget office listened, because those are some of the items that they are proposing to give us funding for as part of our next capital cycle, or as part of our next budget cycle.
Okay, so I think what you're saying is that through the updated park ratings, reappropriations, and your requests, you think you got everything covered? Is that what you're saying?
We have a lot of it covered. We'll never have all of it covered. Jared, this is what happens. We'll come up with programs or maintenance ideas and maintenance programs, or even swapping out benches or certain park amenities with more durable park amenities, so that they don't continue to become recurring problems to us. But when the deferred maintenance assessment, when they were doing the field work for the deferred maintenance assessment, that was done in 2018, and we're 4 years removed from that. And that was what that was for us, was a snapshot and a reality check, not only for ourselves, but for the city, to say, listen, we keep building new things, but we're not fixing what we have, and it keeps tearing up. And the longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to be fixed. And so we've taken that and used that deferred maintenance assessment to prioritize capital funding requests from the department, so that we can begin to get ahead of the game. And if we were able to do that before the 2018 bonds were going out, we probably could have taken the entire $30 million and addressed the majority of our needs. But if you're looking at the very specific line items in the deferred maintenance report, we were able to find that we had funding to address $14.5 million of those needs. As of April 1st, we would have spent in terms of completed improvements, $11.35 million of that 14.5. And so we're almost at the tail end of that. And so we're getting there, and we're using the matrix and the algorithms that the consultant provided to us, so that we can go in and update the park scores ourselves. And it's not that we're just assigning a score to a particular facility. There's a reason by, like, we fixed the parking lot and address parking and accessibility issues. We adjust that portion of it, then it automatically updates the score. But even back when we had spent a little over $5 million, I had completed $5 million of the 2018 bonds that addressed specific deferred maintenance needs, it changed our scores dramatically. And so I'm thinking that by the time we go back and recalibrate and rescore our entire park system again, that the grades will continue to improve. There are certain parks that we just can't improve because they're just open space. So it's never the intent for the city to provide parking at this location. It's just open space. Anybody can drive there. There's parking available on the street, and they're not heavily used facilities. And so we've taken all of that stuff out and rescored them. And feel like we're in a much better position, and we're putting a tremendous dent into the deferred maintenance just at our park locations.
Bob, did that address your concerns?
Not entirely. I got a couple of questions, if I may.
Sure.
You keep hearing about the deferred maintenance report. The deferred maintenance report I'm talking about is the Stewart report in March of 2019.
Yes.
And is that being used and followed, or is that's question number one. The second part of that question is, when there's an assessment done of progress, what if that were done by the consultant?
Okay, so the answer to the first question, every mention of the deferred maintenance assessment was referring to the deferred maintenance report that was provided by Stewart. And so we do use that as a tool. The second part of the question, we don't have the funding to hire Stewart to continue to update the data. That's why we reached out to them to figure out what was their methodology, like where your formulas, there's a massive spreadsheet. I mean, this thing has 20 or 30 tabs on it. And almost every cell on that spreadsheet talks to another cell on the spreadsheet. So when you change one thing, it updates everything across the spreadsheet. And so we sat down and had a long meeting with them to figure out what they used and how they were able to come up with the scores. And if we're able to get the data, and we can pull that data straight from our financial management system and plug that into the spreadsheet and it update itself automatically, I would have to pay someone to do what we could do much quicker. And so would I use stored again? Probably so. As part of the deferred maintenance report, they didn't do a full thorough analysis on recreation centers because there just wasn't enough funding at the time to do so. But that's something that we'll probably come back and do after all of the 18 months have been spent, after we get through that $14.5 million, because that's what property facilities management should be using to help plan their capital needs so they can manage our facilities. And they have other consultants that they use to manage things, but we would look to try to come back and see and have an overall update on where we are now once the majority of this funding has been spent.
Okay, can you send us this slideshow we've been looking at? I hadn't seen that before.
Yeah, it was shared at the committee of the whole. Felicia's going to email that out to you at the conclusion of this meeting.
Okay.
It's not the entire presentation that was done. In order to see that presentation, I think Felicia, we might be able to find a link to that YouTube video from the committee of the whole and share that with the commission. That's when they go over the entire report. We just broke out just the sections that related to recreation.
Okay.
And so the entire presentation is not what she'll send to you. The entire presentation will be shared as part of that presentation to the committee of the whole that was done.
I want what she's going to send to us, please.
Yeah. Okay.
Since, if I may briefly, since there's so much detail in this discussion on various parks, I'm going to raise two of them. You referred to them both, in fact, I think it's somewhat different issues, but I'll be kind about it, mistake that was made on the drainage project at Old Town. I understand that's going to be corrected. And I'd like to know when that's going to get done. I talked with my councilman about that. In fact, I went out there with him because it was such a serious oversight in that project. He tells me he spoke with you, William, and we're going to get that fixed. Do you know what the program is?
The area that was draining was outside of the area for whatever reason that was initially looked at by the consultant that was hired to address it. That was a major oversight. You can't get around that if you've seen it. Yeah, I saw the pictures. I had staff go out there during a heavy rain event, and they saw some of the same things that you saw. We did present those issues to the project manager, and they're working on a corrective solution as we speak. And so they won't leave that site with that issue still being an issue. That's what I've been told. They won't. I'm sorry. Say that again. They won't leave this. The project won't be complete. They won't leave the site with that issue that you mentioned not being addressed. Okay. Before the project closes out, all of that will be addressed. Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. The only other thing, and I'll stop, on Long Creek, which you also referenced in connection with the bonds. At the last meeting, whatever that was, March 1st, I believe, there was a statement made from the department that we were going to get to completion on that in May or June. This is a project that should have been completed many months ago, but I've been over there a couple of times, and if you make it to May, I'm prepared to provide some very nice meals for a lot of people. I mean, it is just stunning how little is going on. I did go there one day, and there were 3 people on a couple of ladders, I guess, alongside the pool house doing something constructive, I'm sure. But we're about to miss season 3 on that pool because it just is incredibly slow.
I went by there yesterday and there were some people working on almost on the shoulder of the road on a project I wasn't sure was related to Long Creek. Maybe it is. So it's an unfortunate commentary because, you have, it's not just here. I mean, if you look at Meadowlark Drive Road project, that project has collapsed. And
That's a 2014 bond project.
well, it's unbelievable. Well, apparently we create millions of jobs in this country and most people just don't want them. I mean, it's a very peculiar set of circumstances and hard to fix, but it's affecting everything. I think the road, my councilman told me the transportation part is the worst. But it would be great to get Long Creek put together. It's a very cool place, a beautiful piece of property, and we really got to get it done. I just don't understand sometimes when you have employees on a job one day and you have 3 days go by and there's absolutely nothing happens. And then the following week, maybe there are a few people. I don't really understand how they manage it. And so
This is one of the biggest issues, and it's not just Long Creek. This is, we've tried to order tables and chairs, even video game cabinets, and we're told you're looking at 4 to 6 months. And we can't even guarantee that. I know that they were waiting on materials out there at Long Creek for about 5 months. And the contractor, and these are very specific items that they need to build a picnic shelter or they need for the roofing on the bathhouse. Without the materials on site, there's really nothing the contractor can do. I know that with the last update that we got from the project manager in terms of when Long Creek was going to be complete was around the first week of June. And I've spoken to Heather Candelora and Greg James. Heather Candelora is our aquatic supervisor, to be prepared to open that pool this summer. If that's when they're telling us that the construction is going to be complete, then it is our plan to open that pool this summer. It may not open on time, on schedule, on Memorial Day weekend or like many of our other pools. But what I also asked her to do was to continue to staff it the best that she can so that it can stay open longer during the pool season. I can't promise you that's going to happen, but that's what I want to happen. If we have lifeguards available, as long as we have lifeguards available, I'm going to keep that pool open for as long as we can. But the latest update that we've received is that the roof is on the bathhouse and things are progressing very, very nicely. And that they're looking to be done out of their final completion with everything around the first week of June, maybe the second week of June, as long as the weather holds off and they can get in there and continue to do their work. It's been a long time, but not just at Long Creek. This has been across the country, and it doesn't matter whether it's a construction project or if you're trying to order furniture for my office, which we ordered, Felicia, almost a year ago, and we're still waiting on it. And it's just taking so long to get anything delivered. And that's impacting everything from construction to Amazon and everything else.
Yeah, I recognize that problem. There's a terrible supply chain problem. So I'm just glad to hear the report. A friend of mine ordered a Ford F-150 late last fall, and I guess he fell off his chair when the truck showed up last week.
Yeah.
This is 6, 8, 10 months to get a car. Of course,
Yep.
Chips don't help, but so it's a big problem. I recognize, but it's just, anyway, that's fine. If they get it done by June, that would be a victory.
Okay,
Thanks, William. Thank you for the report, William.
No problem.
so I think moving on to the next order of business, change to in-person meetings.
Yeah, Chair, I know we have 3 minutes left. I'm gonna try to be as brief as I can. There was a series of emails that was coming out from the city attorney's office in regards to city committees and commissions going back to in-person meetings. On Friday of last week, the governor suspended his state of emergency. He didn't rescind it. He's going to keep it in place because no one really knows what's going to happen with this new strain of Omicron. I was going to make a suggestion, ask the commission to decide whether they wanted to meet in person in May or even in June, or would you like to continue to meet virtually until the state of order is lifted until we receive further direction from the city attorney's office and the city manager's office on how we're going to be expected to proceed.
Okay, so you want us to basically decide among the committee here whether we want to have a May meeting in person, is that
No.
right?
No, when we did the agenda, the governor hadn't done his press conference yet to see whether or not he was going to rescind the state of emergency. And so the plan was to have that discussion today. We found out at his press conference, he didn't rescind it. He just suspended it. And so the change to in-person meetings, we don't have to discuss that right now because the governor's order is still in place. But I do want to, once we get closer to some of these projects being complete, I know that I mentioned this to you before. I want one of our meetings to be, maybe take the commission on a tour so I can show you some of this progress on these construction projects that we've been talking about for the past couple of years. Maybe we can do that at our June meeting after we're able to get some more of these things complete, if that's your wish.
Okay, yeah. I think that would be good. We need to see that.
Yeah.
So we got, 2 minutes left. Shall we just defer these other updates till the next meeting?
Yeah, well, what I can have staff do is we can send you an email that has some updates from those various units. And if you have questions, we can handle those questions via email so that everybody knows the answers and knows what questions are being asked, and just defer that until next month.
Okay, all right. So I guess that wraps up the April Recreation Parks Commission meeting for today. So I guess we need a motion to adjourn.
George Peterson, I'll move to adjourn.
Taylor has a second.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
And I've sent out the 2 presentations. You guys should have those in your inbox. If you guys have any questions about those, please let us know.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, thank you all. You have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week.
You too.
All right.